All right. Good evening, dear friends. Welcome to another MedEdTrust webinar. And this time we have a very good array of cases for you. We will have a good set of cases. We are having the Complex Coronary Intervention Conclave Series 4. We've had 3 very good series. We had a few dedicated ones. This time we thought we'll give you a potpourri or a mix of cases. And to discuss your cases, we have a very good panel. We have a variety panel this time. Dr. Avinash Jayachandran, Dr. K. Chandrasekhar, Dr. Padmanabhan, Dr. Ravichandran Edwin, our special invitee from Tirunelveli, all the way from Tirunelveli is here with us today. And we have 4 presenters also coming in for this complex intervention. Now, I will just introduce you to our moderators. And we have Dr. Avinash Jayachandran, who is consultant interventional cardiologist at RSR Trinity Acute Care Hospital. Dr. K. Chandrasekharan needs no introduction. If he is not there as part of the organizing team of a conference, the conference is not there in Chennai. Senior cardiologist, very well-respected interventional cardiologist and electrophysiologist. Then we have Dr. N. Padmanabhan from KMCH Specialty Hospital, Erode, and then we have the Dr. Edwin from Tirunelveli, who's the professor at other department. He's got his own center also, Angel Heart Care. And incidentally, Edwin is a friend of mine for more than 30 years, and he and my brother happen to be college mates. Now, with that, I will stop, and I think the honors for introducing the first speaker, Dr. Avinash, can you introduce the first speaker? I will project a screen for you on Dr. Arun Pari. Arun Pari, kindly introduce and start the proceedings, please.
Good evening, sir. Dr. Arun Pari is a senior interventional cardiologist in Bharat Hospital, Chennai. He did his MBBS in 2002 at Ramachandra Medical College. Post-graduation subsequently completed from MMC in the year 2007. And he did his DNB cardiology from Triple M Hospital in the year 2011. He's been a consultant interventional cardiologist from 2011 to 13 in Madras Medical Mission, following which he's done his fellowship in Narayana Hrudayalaya from 2013 to 15. He's a senior interventional cardiologist in Bharat Hospital, Chennai.
Dr. Arun Pari, the stage is yours. You can start projecting and go ahead.
Good evening, sir. Good evening, sir, and good evening, one and all. My case today is an interesting complication of left main stenting. Share the screen. So my patient is a 68-year-old female, hypertensive, and very bad history of COPD. She presented with non-STEMI. Echoes revealed a normal LV function, and angiography showed a mid RCA 90% stenosis, and also a mid LAD 90% stenosis, and an ostial left main of around 80% stenosis. So considering her lung status, surgery was considered high risk. So we gave her the option of PCI, staged PCI initially to RCA, and then PCI to LMCA ostium as well as mid LAD. So the initial RCA PCI was a straightforward lesion. It was a mid RCA, it was fixed. And 48 hours after the procedure, we went ahead to do the LMCA as well as the mid LAD. So this is the angiogram. Circumflex is normal. You can appreciate the mid LAD lesion as well as the ostial LMCA lesion, not much of calcium. And so with the routine workhorse wire, we wired and pre-dilated the LAD with 2x12 balloon, and subsequently it was stented with the 2.5 into 28 millimeter DES mid LAD. Straightforward, and we did an IVUS. It showed a slight under malapposition of the stent in the mid LAD. So we post dilated with the 2.5 NC. And then the ostial left main was pre-dilated with 2 into 12 and subsequently with 2.5 into 12 millimeter NC balloon. And we took a 4 into, it initially pre-dilated with 2.5 as well as 3 into 12 balloon. Then subsequently, after assessing the IVUS parameters, we decided to go ahead with the 4 into 12 millimeter. This was an Promus Elite stent, Promus Premier Elite. So after adequate positioning and proper assessment, stent was deployed in the ostial LMCA up to the almost the distal portion of the LMCA. You can see the deployment. It was a smooth deployment. So with the same balloon, after checking, I went up to high pressures. Since this was the result, and there was a slight under expansion at the ostium. So pre-dilated with 4.5 into 8 mm NC balloon. So then we again introduced the IVUS catheter to assess the left main stent apposition, but there was some difficulty, and we couldn't navigate the catheter, and the images were not. I mean, there was a difficulty, so we removed the IVUS catheter to see a check shot. What was happening in this? You can in this video slight expansion of the ostium and or stent zoom. This showed a fracture in the mid segment of the stent. You can clearly appreciate it in this portion.
இந்த மாதிரி வந்துடுறது டெய்லியும் கிடையாது. அது என்னத்துனாலன்னு தெரியல.
So at this point of time, I took another stent to cover up the fracture, and that is a 4 into 12 Resolute Onyx stent. But there was difficulty in negotiating the stent through the already placed stent. So in that maneuver, their wire and the guiding, everything, the wire came out of the the vessel, and with great difficulty we tried rewiring it, but I could never pass through the stent struts. So I could never pass through the lumen of the stent. It went through the struts, and this was the stent which taken at that point of time, where you can clearly see that the wire has gone through the stent struts, and it was very difficult to engage the guide and take it through the lumen. It was a long, nearly 30-35 minutes of rewiring. So this is the shot from the epicranial view. Again, you can see this is a 2 into 12 balloon, which or 2.5 into 12 balloon, which I passed through the already deployed stent, through the struts of the stent, and I decided to put another stent through it. So pre-dilated the existing stent. So you can see that clearly that the balloon has gone to the stent strut and the portion of the strut hanging in the root of the aorta in the sinus. So this is another 4 into 12 Resolute Onyx stent, which was positioned in the distal end of the stent was placed inside the pre-existing stent, and nearly 3 to 4 struts protruding into the aorta. So this, then after adequate checking and the stent was deployed. So this was the result after the initial deployment, the stent whiz. You can see the stent struts hanging freely in the lower portion of the inferior portion of the stent. Then again, I post dilated with the same balloon to high pressures. So now the second stent was adequately deployed, as you can see, which we can see in the stent with the struts hanging, of the struts of the previous stent hanging. So this was the final shot after the deployment. I did not do an IVUS because I thought I should not again damage the protruding stent struts again. So I didn't want to overdo. So it looked adequate. The stent looked adequately expanded in the stent whiz. So I just took a shot of and came out, and this was the final result. Thank you, sir.
Casey, sir, you want to say something? Casey, sir, you have to unmute yourself and talk.
Dr. Arun Pari, I think you have done a good job in stenting that left main finally succeeded. And what guide catheter you used?
It was
Judkins left?
Yes, it was a 7 French actually, 7 French JL 3.5.
No, usually, when you have a osteal lesion, you can have one more extra guide wire protruding into the aortic root, so that it will prevent the tip of the guiding catheter hitting against the ostium of the left main.
Yes, sir.
So
yes,
probably,
sir.
What happened that the stent was protruding more into the aortic lumen, no? That first stent, what you deployed?
Not really, sir. There was a fracture in the proximal 1/3 of the stent, and there was, I was not very sure, there was some foreshortening also, is what I thought actually.
Probably trying to take the IVUS catheter, probably that would have created the havoc,
Yes, sir. Yes, sir. That's
Maybe in this situation, what you can do is you can take a guide liner or this thing. Then through that you can take the thing and then remove the guiding catheter away from the ostium, and then keep the guide liner near the ostium, so that you can try to image that thing. I think that may be a better this thing.
Yes, sir. Probably the left main was it was not very tangential to the guide. It was.
I know, yeah. What is the size of the left main? The diameter?
IVUS.
In the first run, what was the
IVUS diameter?
IVUS diameter.
It was the tightest portion was around 5 millimeters per the lumen area.
Couple of thoughts.
That is ostium is 5 millimeter square millimeter.
Ah, yes.
The luminal diameter, that main left main.
I don't have the IVS run.
Okay,
sir.
no. First stent is what the Promus,
Yes, the Promus Elite stent, sir.
Promus Elite 4 into
12, sir.
12, and the second one is 4.5 into 12 Onyx, Resolute
Yes, sir.
Onyx.
Yes, sir. Yes, sir.
What is the
Second-
maximum? What is the
second one-
maximum diameter the Promus element can go? That 4, that it can go up to 4 or 5 or 5.5.
Up to 5 we can go, sir. That's
Easily
what
go. And the Onyx is, I think, even better, than the Promus
Better,
Elite.
yes,
You can go to even 5.5 with the maximum.
Probably this is the first time I used the Promus Elite stent. I'm not very
Mhm.
sure whether that was the reason for the.
Because especially, this type of cases, you can have what is called as LSD, that is longitudinal stent deformity,
Yes,
due to
sir.
the guide catheter hitting against ostium back and forth like that. So if you have an extra guide wire through the guiding catheter into the aortic root, it will same time you won't lose this thing, but anchor, but same time it won't hit against ostium of the left main. So, but anyhow, you did successfully. What was the pressure and all during the time? Hemodynamically, that lady was stable?
Hemodynamically, patient was okay, sir. That was the plus point. And
Yeah, very good.
the main thing, what went wrong was probably the wire coming out of the.
I know. Yeah. After that, you couldn't wire it properly.
Yes,
Yeah, correct.
And again, that the stent which was deployed was not tangential to the guide, so it was very difficult to take the second stent inside. So at that portion,
especially for a left main intervention or any complex PCA, you should use always Newark items.
yes, sir, all
Newark only. Okay, because our practice is used Oxford, then it can
Yes,
result in problem. No, so that's why.
correct.
Anyhow, you did a good job. Fantastic. Congratulations.
Thank you.
I
Dr.
think
Prabhakar, anything? Yeah.
Nothing, sir. I think you mentioned everything. Couple of things.
Yeah.
One is the stent was in the left main ostium, foreshortening possible. But was the
Yes.
ostium covered in the original stenting, or was it protruding beyond the
Yes,
ostium?
sir. It was protruding two slits protruding into the aorta, sir.
Was the fracture
Outside
there
ostium.
or some other place?
No, fracture in the.
Fracture was in the
Inside the-
proximal 1/3 of this.
So
Yes, sir,
inside the vessel.
Yes.
Nothing much.
Inside.
The other thing is the other important point is always know your stent, because if you use a Zions, I know that 1 millimeter you can definitely go up. 1 millimeter you can go up. So if it's a 4.5 stent, you can go up to 5.5. So the Onyx, I think you have to look up your stent. Those expansions, especially in left main, you have to be very careful, and then go up to your sizes. And but otherwise, I think the unfortunate thing is that you lost the access.
Wire, yes.
Wire came out. That is the sad part.
Yes.
And if you have a wire in the sinus, that is one more thing. It actually anchors it. It doesn't suck it inside, and you have something staying there. That also works. The other important thing I keep telling is, whenever you get into trouble, try to get one more wire inside, so you don't lose the access.
Means, sir, I didn't get you.
Get one more wire inside. Get a second wire inside. Use the first wire for doing everything, but get a second wire inside so that you don't have this problem. See, one of the
From
problems
the
is-
beginning, sir.
No, not when. Once you got into trouble,
Okay, sir.
once you get into trouble, always try to get a second wire inside. You're not going to use the wire, but at least the guide catheter is going to stay put. That slip of the guide and all those things they don't happen. So those things they come in handy whenever you get into trouble. But otherwise, I think final proof of the pudding is that it has done well. You got another stent in place, and that is deployed well. You didn't want to do an IVS because enough trouble was enough trouble. I think fair enough. The final result was good. Any comments from other panelists? Anybody wants?
Just one more point I just want to mention, especially when you're doing a left main PCA, you should know which maximum diameter we can go up to each stent. There is a separate chart is given. I think better you should have it in your cath lab, paste it to the wall, and then you should go through that 2-3 times so that you remember that correctly. That is very important.
But I think up to 5 millimeter, it was okay only.
Yeah, it can go. Yeah, it can go.
But I don't know.
Anyhow,
About
result is Result
Others'
is, final result
experience
is
about-
good.
Yes, sir.
Final result looks okay, good.
Yes, sir.
That's what I haven't fractured one. Anybody else has
How about-
fractured a stent so far?
Sir, I would just like to ask the panelists, like, what would be their choices when of stent while like, doing the left main ostium or anything in particular? If any point you want to add? Sir?
Resolute onyx is better. Resolute onyx is better. Good
I am a
radial
fan.
strength and the size, you know, you can go up to even 5.5. 4 can go up to 5.5.
No, I use Zions a lot and I'm thorough about the stent. So I know 1 millimeter. So I use it because I'm confident about that part. And I've done it confidently. Nothing happens. The stent doesn't fracture. So that part I'm very, very clear. So that is the way I work on stents, because know one stent and know it fully well. Then you know for sure that you are there. If you keep mixing, matching things, then we have to know about all stents. Like Sir says, Onyx is a good stent. There's absolutely no doubt it's a good stent. But the point is, I don't use much of it there in tricky situations because I'm not very familiar with what happens. And I know it will go. Alpine, when it was there, it was fantastic because I know if you keep holding it there, if it doesn't cross somewhere, you just keep holding it. After some time, it goes inside. I've done the bench testing also for that. So it is. There are some stents that you have to know the stents. So if you know them, I think you come out with good results. Any comments from the other panelists or any of the other speakers can also comment. No problem. If there are no further comments, I think we'll go ahead with the second case. Dr. Ravi Edwin is presenting the case. Sir, Casey sir, you want to say a few words?
Yeah. Good evening, dear friends. At the outset, I would like to thank the Meda Trust, especially Dr. Prabhakar, for inviting me to be one of the panelists for this complex coronary interventional conclave. And I think we are, as Dr. Prabhakar has already said, we are going to have a very good mixture of cases, complex cases, and good presenters will be presenting. Now, I think my pleasant duty to introduce Dr. Ravi Chandran Edwin, who is a professor and head of the Department of Cardiology, Tirunelveli Medical College Hospital in Tamil Nadu. And he's also his own heart center, Angel Heart Center, and in Tirunelveli. And he has done more than 15,000 angiograms and more than 5,000 angioplasties and stent implantation. More than 250 permanent pacemaker implantation, and he is a member of organizing committee in several annual conferences, and is a chairman and faculty in various cardiology conferences since 1999, and organizing secretary Tamil Nadu CSI 2020. So now I request Dr. Ravichandran Edwin to present his case on complex coronary interventions. Dr. Ravichandran Edwin, please.
Thank you, sir. Thank you so much for the nice introduction, sir.
Okay.
Thank you so much. And I thank Dr. Prabhakar for having organized such a wonderful meet and such a wonderful get together with the senior faculties. And I'm so thankful to him. And let me introduce the case. And it's a simple case only. And this is just to say how OCT helped in avoiding stenting. You have my first slide, please. I'll go on the history. He's a young gentleman. He was an alcoholic and he had no history of diabetes and hypertension. And he was admitted with acute chest discomfort with a ECG, ST elevation in all the anterior leads. And the echo showed at the time of admission, there was a hypokinesia of LAD territory and there was a moderate LV systolic dysfunction. And the ejection fraction was 41%. Next slide, please. And this was the ECG for the patient. As you could see, it was extensive control MI seen in L1 AVL and all the anterior leads. Next one. So this is the angiogram on the day one. You can see a clean coronaries in the right coronary artery, and the LAD and the LED showed a bifurcation lesion at the level of diagonal, and there was a thrombus here. Next one. And this was the angio after 2 days. We actually wanted to go for 2-stent strategy since there was a bifurcation lesion at the level of D1, and it was a 1-1-1 classification, and we were planning for a DK crush procedure. Next one. And you could see plaque erosion was there, and there was a thrombus. And we actually since we had a OCT with us, we wanted to do OCT before planning a 2-stent strategy. So as you all know, OCT is a promising modality for underlying OCT erosion, and we could differentiate erosion, rupture, and nodule with the help of OCT. And this was the first run. You could see thrombus in the LED, and you could see erosion also. So this is the erosion. You can see here. So clearly you can see erosion at this point. And here also there was erosion. There was no rupture. There was no evidence of any rupture or nodule. And here you could see only thrombus and erosion. Next slide, please. So this run also, you could see thrombus. Clearly thrombosis at the point with the erosion only. And next, we did OCT in diagonal also. Next one. And here were the changes we saw in the bifurcation point. There was a thrombus in the bifurcation angle, and there was a thrombus, red thrombus was seen with the evidence of erosion only, and there was no evidence of rupture everywhere. Next one, please. And the LED pullback, it was 4.4 in the LED, and we could see 2.4 MLA at D1 pullback. Next one. So coronary thrombosis is the most frequent final event leading to acute coronary syndrome. And the 3 most important underlying mechanisms contributing to acute coronary syndrome, as you all know, are plaque rupture, plaque erosion, and calcification. So you could see here disrupted fibrous plaque. Under this, we can see plaque rupture and OCT, the calcified nodule. And in the plaque rupture, you could see the lipid and underlying plaque. An underlying plaque, there will be calcium somewhere. And if there is an intact fibrous cap, as in our case, we will see the features of erosion. And definite evidence will be thrombus will be there, and there will be erosion. Thrombus will be there, and there will be a signs of erosion. There will not be any signs of any cap or any rupture seen. And other findings will be scattered. So these were all the findings usually we used to see in OCT. Next one, please. So here is a features. There were in the plaque rupture, there is a cap, there will be a cavity, and there will be a thrombus. So 3 things will be there for the plaque rupture. And the plaque erosion, nothing will be there. There will not be any cap, there will not be any cavity, only thrombus will be there and erosion will be there. Why I pointed out this slide is the treatment modality is different. If it is a plaque rupture, we'll go for stenting, and if it is erosion, we need not stent the patient. Next one, please. So here, there was a paper in the JACC, in vivo diagnosis of plaque erosion and calcified nodule in patients with acute coronary syndrome by OCT. So here it clearly, they discussed about calcific nodule and erosion, and there no need of any stenting if the MLA is more than 4. If it is more than 2.5 itself, we can defer stenting for the young patients. So ours is a young patient. We wanted to deploy stent, but OCT helped us to defer stenting in this young patient. Next one. So these are all the take-home messages. OCT characterizes the morphologies of most common cause of acute coronary syndrome, and OCT provides unique insights in patients with plaque erosion and calcific nodule in addition to plaque rupture, and fibrous cap rupture was absent in more than 1/2 of the culprit lesions, and patients with OCT erosion were younger, had less severe stenosis, and less frequently presented with STEMI than those with the plaque rupture. And lipid was frequently detected in OCT erosion than in plaque rupture, as in our case. And the cause of thrombus to be identified in this case. And plaque erosion and plaque rupture require different treatment. OCT differentiate clearly on both plaque erosion and plaque rupture. So thus the OCT helped in avoiding stenting in this case. So we deferred stenting in this case, and the patient is doing very good as we follow up the case. Thank you so much.
Excellent presentation, Dr. Ravichandran, Edwin, and I think I was there during that the webinar organized by Dr. Selvamani from Madurai. So I think you presented this case, but I was there in the second half of your presentation. But excellent presentation, and you brought out the utility of imaging, especially the very good imaging modality in OCT in planning the interventional procedure in the acute coronary syndrome. And you nicely brought out the thrombus. You are actually planning for a bifurcation stenting and a DK crush procedure. But I think it helped you in avoiding unnecessary stenting of vessel, especially in a young person. So I think that shows the utility of the imaging system in the acute coronary syndrome setting. And actually, I was there, and people are discussing. And when the luminal diameter, if it is less than 2 millimeter, I think we should go in for stenting. No, that's what Dr. Ajit Mullasari was telling. And actually, if you know, you nicely brought out what are the different pathology in bringing out the acute coronary syndrome, like plaque rupture, plaque erosion, and calcific nodule. Actually, among the three, the most common is plaque rupture, which accounts for nearly 60% of acute coronary syndrome presentation, and the plaque erosion accounts for nearly 25 to 30%. And the remaining by the others. Maybe you also showed about the spontaneous coronary artery dissection, and also calcific nodule considered around 5 to 8% of acute coronary syndrome patients. And especially in this is very useful imaging modality in avoiding unnecessary stenting, especially in patients when they are presenting with the plaque erosion. And you nicely brought out the OCT images, how to differentiate between the plaque rupture and plaque erosion. And you showed very nicely the presence of a cap and the presence of a cavity and thrombus in plaque rupture. And in plaque erosion, there is no cavity, no rupture of the cap, no cap and no rupture of the cap. But erosions you demonstrated, and also presence of white thrombus very nicely demonstrated in your OCT images. So what was the medical management you went ahead with this young patient? Whether did you give put the patient on any oral anticoagulant or only antiplatelet therapy? What was your planned treatment?
Patient was in glycoprotein 2B3 receptor antagonist, sir, for 2 days. Then I started the patient on dual antiplatelet drug, ticagrelor and aspirin. And now on follow-up, the patient is doing very well, and the ejection fraction has gone up to 60%, sir.
Actually, during the discussion, they were telling maybe we can put them on a oral anticoagulant, the novel, this thing, for a month, and then followed up with the dual antiplatelet therapy. And
Yes, sir.
how long you are planning to continue the dual antiplatelet therapy?
So for 1 month, I wanted to put the patient on oral anticoagulant, sir, along with the antiplatelets.
Okay, okay. How long to continue that? How long you are planning to continue?
1 month, sir.
And
Only for 1 month. Then
then-
DAPT for 1 year, sir.
1 year, yeah, especially in acute coronary syndrome patient, high risk patients, better to continue because in the patient is a very young patient, better to continue for minimum 12 months. Minimum 12 months.
Yes, sir.
A very nice case and very nicely you brought out all the points in the imaging with the help of OCT imaging, and nicely demonstrated how you avoided unnecessary stenting in a young patient, showing that the plaque erosion nicely and differentiated from plaque rupture. Dr. Prabhakar, any other queries from your side? Thank you, Dr.
Sir, you
Ravichandran.
have conducted a complete Viva OC, sir.
Huh?
You have completed a complete Viva OC for Tin on the topic. I don't think there's much to add, but a couple of small comments. One is that it's very useful when you have a thrombotic lesion where you don't expect a really flow limiting lesion. IVUS is going to differentiate it and tell you that it's going to be a plaque erosion. But it doesn't have to be done for every case. So it's not that we don't have to do an overkill on that. Like if let's say if you have a 90% lesion or a total occlusion wherein you have to definitely go stent to open the lesion, then there's not much of a choice. I think you just have to go ahead and stent it. But wherein you think that this is going to make a difference, you have to select it and then go ahead and do the stenting. Regarding the antithrombotic therapy, dual antiplatelet, yes, there is clear data on that, but I'm not very sure if anybody else is aware, please tell me about anticoagulation. It sounds sensible when you have a thrombus to give anticoagulation, but apart from 2 to 5 days of anticoagulation or even a 2B3A, which we normally give, when we notice such things, definitely we give a 48-hour infusion of what do you call that, Terifluban or something we give him. And after that, what is the role of oral anticoagulation for 1 month? And during that 1 month, what happens to your antiplatelet? Because if you're going to combine a dual antiplatelet therapy with an anticoagulation, the risk of bleed goes high. So I think we have to weigh all the risks, pros and cons. And in fact, my own personal conception about plaque stabilization is very important. Push them on a 40 milligrams of rosuvastatin. I think that is very important. And don't stop the 40 milligram rosuvastatin. Don't bother. Lipids, LDL cholesterol up to 15 milligrams long term has safety data. Up to 15 milligrams. Less than 15 milligrams doesn't have data. So up to 15 milligrams of LDL cholesterol, you can safely give a high intensity statin continue. I think that is very important to prevent further plaque erosion and plaque rupture.
No, this oral anticoagulation, I think the Madras Medical Mission, they have conducted a large study, maybe around 150 patients or something. I don't exactly remember the number of patients, but I think Dr. Ajit Mulasari was telling, especially all young patients with acute MI or non-STEMI, acute coronary syndrome with non-STEMI or ST elevation MI. And they found plaque erosion by OCT imaging and they put them on oral anticoagulant for 1 month, then followed up with dual antiplatelet therapy. But he told me that they have published in some journal, I forgot the name, which journal and which year, which month and which year. But I think Ravichandran Edwin was there. He presented the paper and after that only they discussed all this.
Low dose of rivaroxaban, 2.5 milligrams.
Yeah, that's what he was telling, yes.
Along with the DAPT.
And one more point I just want to highlight here, especially the OCT has got a very high spatial resolution. So because of the spatial resolution when compared to the IVUS, so these type of plaque characteristics will be we can make out easily with the help of OCT imaging rather than with the IVUS imaging. This plaque erosion, calcific nodule, very nicely we can brought out. But IVUS, the latest IVUS with 60 Hertz transducer also, high definition IVUS also can be compared, but I think OCT will score over IVUS in this point. That is especially for assessing the plaque morphology and plaque characteristics, especially plaque rupture, erosion, and calcific nodule, differentiating between white thrombus and the red thrombus. So very nicely we can work out the differences. And it was very nicely brought out by Dr. Ravichandran in his case with the OCT imaging. Thank you, Dr.
Thanks,
Ravichandran.
for excellent case that you have brought in. I think we'll go to the next presentation. I think I'll invite Dr. Edwin to introduce Vinod. Dr. Vinod's got a case to present.
Yeah. Here is Dr. Vinod. He is assistant professor and he is a consultant interventional cardiologist, SRMC Chennai. He's the best outgoing student and he is associate member in ACC and observership program at Mount Sinai Hospital, New York in interventional cardiology training from here, and short-term training program. He had a fellowship in intracoronary imaging and he had a rich academic teaching experience and involved in various clinical projects. He attended and organized national and international CMEs and conferences. He has an experience of 6 years. So over to Dr. Vinod Kumar, please.
Thank you so much for your kind words, sir. Right now, I will try to share my screen. Is my screen visible?
Yes, you're good.
So today I thought we will present a case on ACS, how the plaque modifying devices will be useful and what should be choice during an ACS in a calcified lesion. I thank Dr. Prabhakar sir for giving an opportunity to present this case in this August gathering. I got a call from my friend. His mother had a chest pain. She's a physician. She had a chest pain. She's 74 and she had a chest pain around 5:30 in the evening on 10th, which lasted for 10 minutes. But she continued to see her OP. And about 10:30 or 11, when they wanted to close the clinic and come back to the nursing home, she told his son. So they went again and did an ECG and they sent me. But the patient did not have ongoing chest pain at that point. There was no nausea, vomiting, breathing difficulty, palpitation, nothing was there with the patient. But there is a pain which was radiating to the left hand at probably at 5:30. Then she's a known case of hypertensive, recovered from COVID 20 days back. And all other things are okay. And she was started for that for single antiplatelet and the statin post-COVID recovery. That was her status. And they sent me an ECG around 11 o'clock in the night that showed inferior wall changes, but patient was absolutely fine. We asked her to come to a center. We did a cardiac panel 3, which was positive, and echo was inferior and no clinical findings were not significant. Echo showed only the inferior segments were hypokinetic, basal inferior segments were hypokinetic. Other segments were contracting normally. LV was adequately good. EF was more than 50. Then what I did is, but though there was not pain, since it was on ACS, it's a very close friend of mine. So we took her in the around midnight for an angiogram. I thought if the weather will look into the angiogram. Angiogram showed a middle AD or borderline lesion. Circ was okay, distally diffusely diseased. Otherwise, it was okay. RCA we did, angiogram showed a clear-cut 99% calcified lesion. But one good thing was it was a flowing vessel. We had a TIMI2 flow distally. It was middle of the night. I didn't want to do anything with the calcified lesion since the patient was absolutely off pain. And we have loaded already with the patient with loading dose and we have given heparin. I thought there is a pain, again we will go in. Otherwise, we will take this patient with the backup in the morning. So since it was an ACS patient, the chance for no reflow phenomena is very high with rotablation. So we thought we will go with IVL therapy. So that was the idea. So we crossed the lesion with a microcatheter caravel using a run-through wire. Post run-through, we exchanged the wire with Grand Slab. After that, with using a 2.5 into 12 millimeter balloon, we pre-dilated that segment. After we did after POBA, we took a IVUS run. The IVUS run that was from the PDA, the large PDA, into the distal and mid portion of RCA. We could appreciate a lot of calcium. The arcs were varying from 180 degree to 360 degree throughout the lesion. So it was very calcified lesion. So the PDA distal reference area was 1.95. The PDA lesion level was, our area was 3.21. And the mid segment where was the tight lesion post ballooning, we got an area of about 3.77. So throughout the vessel was almost, it was calcified. So we went ahead with an IVL 3.5. See, now the length of the lesion was more than 60 millimeter. Even the PDA, distal RCA had a calcified segment, but the IVL, we all know we can go only for about, it was very expensive. So we went with the culprit lesion IVL optimization. So we went for 3.5 into 12 millimeter balloon, and we gave about 4 cycles at the lesion site, and 2 cycles proximal to the lesion, and the 2 cycles distal to the lesion. Post IVL, we did a check angiogram. Angiographically, the lumen area seems to be good. We tried sending the catheter, IVUS catheter again. There was a small resistance. So what we did is we took back and we went ahead with 3.5 into 12 NC balloon, and we post IVL, we dilated the vessel completely to the entire extent, and then post dilatation, we went ahead with 3.5 into 48 millimeter DES. We could transport the stent very easily. There was no much difficulty in transporting. Post deployment, we could appreciate a under expansion both at the proximal part of the stent as well as at the distal portion of the stent, even angiographically. So we went ahead with 3.5 into 12 millimeter NC balloon. We gave a good dilatation throughout the stent's entire stent length. After that, we took an angiogram. We found the distal segment now. The guide could easily engage. Now the patient was hemodynamically stable. We didn't want to leave the distal portion of the stent and lesion untreated. So now we thought, so we went ahead and we took a NC balloon, OPN NC balloon, 2.5 into 12 millimeter balloon. And we went ahead and prepared the distal bed with that OPN balloon, because even that part was calcified. So post preparation of the bed with OPN balloon, we took the next stent. We could transport the stent now comfortably, and post it was about 2.5 into 32 millimeter DES. After deployment of the stent, since it was a mismatch between the 2 stents sizes, we gave a very good high pressure at the junction. After that, with the same NC balloon, still angiographically we could note there was under expansion in the distal portion of the first stent and the proximal portion of the same stent. So we went again and did one more NC ballooning with 3.5 balloon, post which we did a IVUS run. We want to make sure that everything is fine and we want it to come out. So we did a IVUS run, and that IVUS run clearly showed a good amount of expansion distally. The distal stent was extremely expanded very nicely. But when we come to the proximal portion of the stent, that is RCA, the first stent, we had an under expansion. It was clearly noted with the measurements. If you could appreciate that, the proximal most segment was about 5.49. This is the proximal most stent MSA. It was only 5.49. The average area in the mid portion of the stent was about 7.62. So, and the good portion, the maximum expansion was 8.6. Now, I had a threshold. I want to improve the proximal segment. I don't want to leave that like that and come out. So what we did is we took a OPN balloon, 3.5 millimeter into 10 millimeter balloon, and we gave a very good expansion balloon dilatation. We went up to the pressures of 40, 32, 34, 36, then 40. We went sequential dilatation of the stent, and post this, we did one more IVUS run to appreciate whether we are able to get the expansion. My aim was to reach at least 8.3, which was the maximum expansion we got. So at least near 8.3 to 8.4 at the proximal segment also, which we gained in the mid portion. Post IVL, we got 8.4 to 8.6. I wanted to achieve the same thing proximally also. So we did a run which showed a proximal edge MSA, we gained up to 8.2. It was very close to 8.4. So after this, I don't have any guts to go and do again dilatation. So the proximal, the minimum stent area at the PDA was 4.84. If you can remember, the distal reference area was 4.9 in the PDA. the segment. So we could achieve up to 4.84 in the PTA. And distal RCA, we could achieve up to mid RCA, we could achieve up to 7.88. So it was very good expansion we could note on the stent level. This was the final shoot. After there was an aneurysm in the osteoproximal segment. We didn't touch it purposefully. We measured the stent luminal area just before the aneurysm. It was about 5.7 to 5.9. So we didn't do anything at that spot, and we came out of this. This was our final imaging of the vessel post IVL, post dilatation OPN. Thank you.
Dr. Edwin, anything you want to say? OCT man wants to talk about IVUS.
Nice.
Actually, no, what is the cost of the IVL balloon? Dr. Vinod Kumar, nice, a very nice presentation, and you brought out all the points, especially, that calcification of the coronary artery is a very important predictor of long-term outcome of PCI.
Yeah.
So you should have a very good preparation of the lesion, especially when you see the calcium. And actually, the incidence of calcification in acute coronary syndrome, the moderate calcium is around 25%, whereas severe calcification has been noted in around 6% of the cases. So if you see a calcium in the acute coronary setting, I think better you should have a very good preparation, and you did the right thing not to do in the middle of the night. You brought the patient, since the patient was stable that time, and you brought the patient next day morning, and you did with the IVUS guidance. So imaging is very, very important when you see a calcification. And usually, in the you will underestimate the calcification with the angio. So even in angio, you can see the calcium. That means it is a fairly significant calcium, and you did the right thing. What is the cost of the IVL balloon?
3.3 to the patient, sir. Around 3 lakhs, depending upon the hospital. They give it 2.7 lakhs. After that, whatever your hospital charges.
I think maximum you can give 80 pulses, 8 cycle and 10 pulses per cycle. No, that's what.
Yeah, 10 pulses per cycle.
You gave 4 cycles at the lesion and 2 proximal and 2 distal.
Yes, sir.
And the flow in the PLB was a little sluggish. Was there any problem?
It was occluded from the beginning. It was occluded.
Okay.
We did not to mess up with that. Even my
angiogram
showed it. So our aim was to secure that mid portion only, sir.
Mid portion.
Since the patient was good, we did. So I'm planning for an FFR for the LAD after 3 months. Probably that time we will, if required, we will see. But from the angiogram point perspective, the previous night, the next day post procedure, the flow was better.
Very good.
PLB.
And you said there is an aneurysm in the proximal RCA, no?
Yeah.
Is it an aneurysm or ectasia? How will you differentiate?
Ectasia, sir. It is not more than 2.5 times of the vessel, so it could be an ectasia.
Should be an ectasia.
Ectasia.
Yeah.
But we didn't want to touch it that time.
Yeah, better not to touch. There is no lesion also, no? There.
Yeah, no lesion. The plaque button was very, very less.
Excellent case and nicely done. Very good. Congratulations. Thank you.
Thank you, sir. Thank you, sir.
Thank you very much.
Sir, why not you did try doing IVL once again after post stenting, so that post dilatation can be a little easier?
Oh, see, two things. Rahul, sorry. 2 things, Rahul. One is there is no data for an acute IVL, that is stent expansion, under expansion treated with IVL immediately post deployment. There is no data available currently, but ISR they have utilized. We will not know how it is going to work. Next is the cost of the therapy. I have used 8 cycles. Now, if I have to go for an IVL, it is going to cost me again 3.3 lakhs. But OPN is 30,000. So obviously, that is the one more thing. But I strongly believe, I don't think so. Someone has currently have done immediately post stent deployment. They have used IVL for expansion. I'm not sure. I don't think so. There is
some webinars, sir, like in I think some German operator, they have done immediately post calcific patient who couldn't expand the stent. they've done IVL and they put the expansion. That's what I.
Okay, I'm not sure. I'm not done. We have done only 5 or 6 cases in our center, and our experience is very, very limited. But once under expansion is there, we use OPN only. Because they are asking us to, the company is asking us to deliver at least 4 cycles at the lesion. So you will not be left with any pulses when you want to dilate even post. Then if you want to take for post dilatation, again it will cost you 3.3 lakhs. So this procedure itself was around 7 lakhs for the patient. So since it's my friend, I could do it. Otherwise, it's very difficult.
Actually, it's a very excellent case, sir. Taking this case middle of night, someone we've known, and leaving her, seeing the anatomy, better take the next day. It's like an excellent decision which was made by you. I think most of us will try to do something and land up in trouble instead of planning and proceeding.
She was like my mother, so I didn't want to take any risk on her. I know her for a long time, so I didn't want to do anything heroic that night. I want to be very, very sure. I want a surgical backup. I want the best surgeon to be around. I want my colleagues to be around. So full setup, full backup, the best sister, because night we will have a junior most sister, only one technician. So that and all will be very difficult. So I didn't want to do. But what I did is I stayed back that night. I want to make sure if she develops pain, I want to go in anyway. That is my idea. But nothing happened like that. She was very much pretty okay. That's why we took us as a first case the next morning.
IVL has actually made a lot of difference in management. People have started using IVL more and more. And
Yes, sir.
you have to differentiate, and you have to select your cases for rotablation and IVL depending on imaging, where your calcification is. Imaging comes in very handy depending on the location of the calcification. If it's going to be intimal or something, the rota is going to work better. And if it is going to be beyond the intima, then the IVL is the only thing that is going to penetrate and work much better. So I think that is also important to select your modality of use. Those days we used to say try to use a cutting balloon and this and that, but that never breaks the calcium. It's only for a fibrotic plaque. And OPN balloons, yes, good, but I think it has made a difference. In like this, you have clearly shown that it has made a big difference. It is also, though it's expensive, but it's worth it, because if you really want to break it, it really comes in. The 30, 35, 40 atmospheres of pressure really makes a big difference in breaking the calcium sometimes, and then pushing it open. Probably the IVL was not reasonably enough. Calcium was much more than what was expected. So that's why it didn't probably open, and probably a very tight lesion, fibrotic lesion also. Maybe an additional of if the post IVL, did you do an OCT post IVL?
Sir, I did a post IVL. We did a IVS run, sir. We did a IVS run.
Sir,
what has happened is that area where we gave no, sir, IVL, that segment 4 pulses we gave no, that segment had a very good expansion. We got an area of about 8.6, but we couldn't give because the entire area was calcium. So the acute lesion we gave 4 pulses. Then proximally we went and gave 2 pulses, and distally we gave 2 pulses. But that was not effective. Probably if we had a liberty of using 2 IVL balloons, probably then it would have probably if we have given 4 pulses proximally and distally to the lesion also.
The problems of, did you have any of those shock related topics, shock topics as they call it? No other issues. Otherwise, you're quite stable.
I didn't get you, sir. Sorry.
Electrically, patient was very stable with your IVL.
Yeah, nothing, sir. Nothing. She was quite stable. Only thing is, post IVL balloon preparation, we went for the NC balloon dilatation. That time she complained of chest pain. So that is the one thing I thought, okay, nothing. We will go and fix the culprit alone and come out. So we didn't want to do anything for the distal and all that moment. So I was a little worried since she started saying, I have pain now. So that is the only moment I had an issue. Otherwise, no electrical disturbance, nothing, no ectopics, nothing. She was quite stable throughout the procedure, even with the
excellent demonstration of imaging, IVL not opening up, and then going for an OPN balloon. I think everything that you had on the shelf, you managed to use on that day. Congrats on a good result. Fine. Thank you so much, Dr. Vinod. I think next, Dr. Casey, sir, I think you.
Now, one more. Just I want to mention one point. The plus point for IVL is the learning curve is very short.
Very short.
very short, so that we can use it. And the only thing is the negative point is costlier, but again the positive point is it can attack both the superficial calcium and the deep calcium, whereas a rotational arthrotomy can tackle only the superficial calcium. So the IVL can tackle both the deep calcium as well as the superficial calcium. And another point is it is costly, and we can give only limited pulses like 80, that is 8 cycles only we can give. And as you rightly said, if you want to do some more this thing, then we have to take one more balloon and the cost will get doubled up. So thank you. Nice case presentation, Dr. Vinod.
Proceed, sir.
Excellent case.
You can introduce Rahul for the next case, sir.
Doctor, I have the pleasant duty of introducing Dr. Rahul. He's a consultant intervention cardiologist, JP Hospital, Pollachi. And he did his undergraduation from Mysore and MD General Medicine from Meenakshi Medical College, Tamil Nadu, and DM Cardiology from PSC Coimbatore. And areas of interest: transradial approach, complex coronary intervention, and intracoronary imaging and physiology. More than 10 national and international publications is made, and then he has done more than 1,000 PTCA, mostly transradial, nearly 90% transradial. And Dr. Rahul, the podium is yours. You can present on your.
Thank you for the kind words, sir.
What is the device block modification in? No, DK crest step by step. Sorry, DK crest step by step. Thank you.
I think everyone can see my screen. So this is a 68-year-old female patient who's a diabetic, underwent PCA to RCA. Now she came to me for an elective PCA to LAD and diagonal. So this is the angiogram. As you see, it's equal sized LAD and diagonal, and has a narrow angle, and it's a Medina 111, both branch vessel, main vessel, proximal and distal is diseased. So I decided to go ahead with the upfront two-stent strategy, go by radial approach using a San French guide. So some steps might be like, okay. So I plan to do a DK crush because I decided to go ahead with the upfront two-stent strategy. This is my step one. After wiring both the vessels, the branch vessel was dilated. It was dilated using a 2.5 into 8 mm NC balloon. After that, the main vessel was dilated using a 3.5 into 8 mm NC balloon, which I couldn't store it, because whenever we do a bifurcation lesion, because of a lot of fluoro time, we don't do much of cine. So sometimes we miss storing the fluoros. So that I am giving a pictorial representation. So the balloon which I used to dilate the main vessel, I just parked in distal ready for further use. So this is a step 3 where the side branch was stented. This was a 2.75 into 18 mm Zines Expedition disc. So this is the stent deployment. After the, as you can see, the balloon which was used to dilate the LAD is kept distally for further use. So again, this step was not captured in my fluorosave. So the balloon which was kept in the LAD was pulled back, and the stent which was deployed in the diagonal was crushed with the 3.5 into 8 mm balloon which was kept in the LAD. That was done after finishing the post dilatation of diagonal. So after that, actually the other steps which we couldn't show is after that, as you see, after this step, I removed the wire and everything from the diagonal and did a crush. After that, the diagonal was recrossed and studs were opened using a 2 into 8 mm NC balloon, and then 2.75 balloon was tracked into the diagonal. And the same balloon 3.5 into 8 mm NC was pulled back, and first kissing balloon inflation was done. So after this first kissing balloon inflation, this is the flow in the diagonal. Decided to stent the LAD. I took a 3 point. So after the kissing balloon inflation, again everything was removed from the diagonal, and the LAD was stented with a 3.5 into 23 mm Zines expedition test. So after that, after finishing the post dilatation of LAD, part was done with a 4 into 6 mm NC balloon, starting from the area which covered the diagonal ostium, the proximal LAD stent struts. So this is after the part. Then again, the diagonal was rewired. And this time the opening the struts needed a 1.58 balloon followed by a 2 into 8 balloon. Then I could track this 2.75 into 12 NC. And the 3.5 into 8 mm balloon was used in the 10 mm balloon was used in the diagonal. So this is the final kissing balloon inflation was done in this. This is the final kissing balloon inflation. After this kissing balloon inflation, the procedure was completed by doing a report using a 4 into 6 mm NC, and this is the final result with a good TIMI3 flow and well expanded stent in both LAD and diagonal visually. Because in my lab I don't have access to imaging, so no imaging was done. And this patient is under regular follow-up and underwent treadmill after 1 year completing the procedure, which was negative. So as per EBC recommendation, we should try to keep it simple and safe whenever we are dealing with a bifurcation lesion. We should try to recreate the original bifurcation anatomy as original as possible, and make sure we limit the number of stents and reduce the overlap, and make sure the stents are well deployed so that patient has a long-term benefit. With that, I'll end my presentation.
So nice demonstration, Dr. Rahul, of the DK Crest step-by-step, excellent demonstration. And I think you've done even without imaging, and you've done a good job. So especially when you do a bifurcation, I think better to use an imaging, either IVUS or OCT, because when you are recrossing the diagonal, I think you should always do it in the proximal cell, because when you go distally, when you put the balloon and dilate, it will create a new carina, so that it will distort the stent. But anyhow, you have done a very good job even without imaging. And whenever you are doing a part, I mean, where did you keep the distal marker when you do the
distal marker was like almost covering the diagonal ostium, so just one strut.
Just before that carina, otherwise it will again distort the stent. And you've done what was the size of the balloon you used for the part?
Part I used 4 into 6 mm, sir.
4 into 6, yeah. Actually, in DK crush, you have to do twice. Two times you have to do crushing, 2 times rewiring, and 2 times kissing balloon. So it's actually cumbersome procedure. But of all the bifurcation stenting, I think DK crush will give a long-term outcome, better long-term outcome when compared to the other like Collard stenting or tab technique or other bifurcation stenting. DK crush is a better thing. And in the DK Crest 8 trial, they have done a study, comparing IVUS and the angio-guided PCI. And they classified into major criteria and minor criteria. That is if the lesion, the side branch, they have taken into account the length of the side branch lesion. If it is equal to or more than 10 millimeters, it is a complex lesion. Or if the diameter stenosis of the side branch, if it is equal to or more than 70%, again it is a major criteria for. It is called as a complex bifurcation lesion. That is this is the major criteria, and the minor again if you do for the this is for the left main, distal left main bifurcation lesion, complex lesion. That is the side branch. If the lesion length is equal to or more than 10 millimeters, and the diameter stenosis of the side branch is, if it is equal to or more than 70% stenosis. So this is for the left main, distal left main bifurcation lesion. Whereas for you did the non-left main bifurcation lesion. For this, again the lesion length remains the same. The side branch lesion length is equal to or more than 10 millimeters, but the diameter stenosis should be equal to or more than 90%. And the minor criteria is moderate calcification, multiple lesions, and other factors. I mean, especially if the carinal angle, if the bifurcation angle is, bifurcation angle less than 45 or more than 70 degrees, and thrombus containing lesion, all these are put into minor criteria. And when the complex bifurcation lesion is defined as a one, which has one major criteria and two minor criteria. So this is the complex coronary lesion. And actually, as per the EBC thing, provisional stenting strategy is always better, especially for non-left main bifurcation lesion. And anyhow, in provisional stenting, if you have a slow flow effect, if the STEMI flow is less than 3, or if there is a dissection or the stenosis of the side branch is more than 75% or 80%, then we can go ahead with the second stenting. So less number of metal is always better, especially in the non-left main location. But anyhow, you did a very good job in demonstrating very nicely step by step the TK Crush technique, and the final result is excellent. There is no problem, and nicely demonstrated. Even without imaging, you proved that you can do a bifurcation stenting and non-left main bifurcation stenting even without imaging. Excellent job you did. Thank you.
I have no other this thing, sir, because my center is like a one-man show. Imaging and those things will become very expensive for me to keep it.
I know, correct. Yeah. The patients also will finding it difficult to pay, no?
Yes.
So that is the problem. When you use all the latest gadgets, I think the cost factor will go up. So very difficult. When you are practicing in a city or in a high volume center, you can do that. So that when you do more number of cases, you can bring down the cost of the procedure. Whereas when it is a single man show, I think what you did is correct, and you have done a very good job. Very good. Congratulations.
Very good result, Rahul. Only thing.
Excellent. Without imaging, has done a good job.
Exactly. It looks really good. The
Really
only
good,
thing
I
that you have to remember is when you are decided on doing all this, make sure that you have enough length of the stent proximal to the bifurcation to do a pot.
I know that is.
Don't make a mistake. Don't make a mistake of putting a shorter length there. That is one. And second thing is, before you do the recross, the first pot is very important. It opens the struts for the stent to enter the side branch. So that is also very important. So that length of the strength, and the other thing is your first pot. First pot is important. People don't talk. People always say finish it with the pot. But that first pot is the one that is very important, that opens up the struts and you can enter and do it. And try to enter it proximally, distally, all those things are also there. Imaging comes very handy to know which strut you're entering. But otherwise, what you try to do is you try to go provisionally with a stent boost and try to see what happens. That's what I think can be done in a center like yours. Anyway, excellent result. Thank you so much, Dr. Rahul. Dr. Avinash, you can introduce our last speaker who's been waiting for a very long time to get his case going. Avinash, you can introduce Dr. Suresh.
Yes. Dr. Suresh Kumar is a senior consultant cardiologist from Chengalpet. He's done his MBBS from Chengalpet Medical College, MD from Stanley Medical College, and DM from Government MMC Medical College. He's won many awards. He won recently the 2013 CSA award and also successfully selected from the first round of Young Scholar Award in 2014. He's a very busy practitioner in Chengalpet, and I also know him for quite a few years. Suresh Kumar sir, please take over.
Thank you for the introduction. I'll try to share my screen. Good evening, everyone. Today I am given the topic of Zynes short DAPT program, Zynes 90 and 28. This is presented by
slideshow, Suresh.
Yeah, yes. Thanks. This is the evaluation of safety of 3 months and 1 month DAPT in high bleeding risk patients. This is presented in TAT 2020 by Roxana Maharan. I am just representing this today. DAPT is essential for preventing of ischemic events after PCA, but increasing the risk of bleeding inevitably. Patient at high risk of bleeding constitute up to about 40% of the subjects are undergoing PCA. As the hemorrhagic events following the PCA have substantially prognostic implication, bleeding avoidance is very important for the patient outcome. The recent trials on next generation DES have shown an acceptable safety profile with short course DAPT. However, the optimal DAPT duration in high bleeding risk patient remains unknown. So this is by Science platform. Stent platform is multi-link stent design of 81 micrometer. Then polymer coating of durable fluoropolymer coating. Drug is everolimus with an average drug concentration of 100 microgram per centimeter square. So in high bleeding risk patients who have undergone successful PCA with Science stent and completed a short DAPT regimen of 1 month. This is a Science 28 study, or a 3 months. This is Science 90 study. Without experiencing any adverse ischemic event, continued treatment with aspirin monotherapy would be non-inferior to DAPT up to 12 months with respect to ischemic events and superior with bleeding. Respect to bleeding. It's a non-inferior for ischemic and a superior for bleeding. So the primary objective is to evaluate the safety, that's all-cause death and myocardial infarction for a short course DAPT regime, 1 or 3 months versus a DAPT up to 12 months. The secondary objective is to determine the impact of short DAPT versus DAPT for up to 12 months on clinical relevant bleeding, bar 2 to bar 5. To evaluate stent thrombosis, this is only for Science 90. So Science DAPT program, it may be Science 3 months program. This is Science 90. Science 28 is a 1 month program. It is a global, both studied in US and globally. Science 90 only in the US. These are Roxana Maharan is a primary investigator with macro bulky medium. So the sites, the Science 28, 58 sites in the US and 52 sites in Europe and Asia, but Science 90, 101 sites in US. So the criteria are high bleeding risk criteria. They are taken into account the high bleeding risk criteria, age more than 70 or a chronic OAC therapy or renal failure with a serum creatinine of more than 2.0 or patient on dialysis, anemia with a hemoglobin less than 11 or a platelet count less than 1 lakh, major bleeding in the last 12 months and history of stroke. The angiographic criteria, successful PCA, exclusive use of Science stent, target was diameters 2.25 to 4.25, target lesion is less than 32, and less than 3 target lesion with less than 2 target lesion per vessels. The exclusion is they completely excluded the STEMI presentation and severe LV dysfunction less than 30% EF, and any planned surgery within 1 or 3 months, so that the DAPT can be continued up for 3 months. The angiographic criteria for exclusion of target lesion containing thrombus. So they excluded thrombus containing lesion and STEMI presentation. PCA with overlapping stents and left main saphenous vein grafting or instant restenosis CTO cases they are omitted. This is the study design. So index PCA for Science 90, they will continue DAPT for 3 months and stop it, and only aspirin up to 12 months. The primary endpoint is after 12 months. In Science 28 study, it's 1 month of dual antiplatelet therapy. They stop the P2Y12 inhibitor and they continue aspirin and they follow for 6 months and 12 months. The primary endpoint is 6 months. So about both in the Science 90, about 2047 patients are enrolled, but the 3 months clear plate, they have about 88% patients. In Science 28, about 1,600 patients, and 1 month clear patients, 1,392, that's 90% patients came in for study. So the high bleeding risk for Science 90, more than 75 age is 65%. Only more than 75 age is 35%. OAC chronic 40%. Hemoglobin less than 11 grams is 16%. History of stroke is 7%. The average number of criteria met is 1.5 for Science 90, and for Science 28, the average criteria is about 1.6. These are the patients variable. About the age is 75%, and most of the patients are hypertensive, dyslipidemic, and GFR less than 60 is about 40%, and NSTEMI of 7% and unstable of 28%. And more patients have more of stable coronary patients, and the precise DAPT scores is more than 25. This is very important, because more than 25, we need the patients are having high bleeding risk. So multivessel disease 46%, they have done a multivessel disease, and bifurcation in calcium lesion are 33%. So the primary endpoint is all-cause death and all myocardial infarction for non-inferiority study between Science 90 and the control, and Science 28 versus control. Same secondary endpoint, as I already told, is a BAR 2 to 5 bleeding and stent thrombosis. So for control, they have taken another study. This is this DAPT Science V USA study. This was done in 2008 to 2001. Because in this study they didn't have any control, so they took the control from a Science V USA study, where the DAPT was given for 1 year. About 85% completed a DAPT for 1 year in Science V USA study, but this was done in very long back, 2008 to 2011. So they matched propensity score matching. They matched with propensity stratification about 5 quintiles according to the age, and they put a score of propensity score, and with this they may match with the old study. Similarly for Science 28. So thus we are able to get a control group for both Science 90 and Science 28 from Science V USA study. So the result, all-cause death for Science 90 is propensity score stratified mean, both the MI and death are both present in 5.4% and 5.4% after 1 year. So there is non-inferiority analysis. There is no increase in ischemia when you stop DAPT within 3 months and continue aspirin for another 9 months. It is non-inferiority to 12 months DAPT score. So Science 28 also 1 month. So there's some difference, 3.5% to 4. Actually, the Science V US have high MI and death when compared to a 1 month usage of DAPT and followed by aspirin for another 11 months. So this is also come into place with non-inferiority analysis. When comparing the BAR 2 to 5 bleeding, for Science 90, it is 5.1 to 7%. It's not statistically difference. And here in Science 28, between 1 month and 6 months, 4.59% when compared to 5.9% for 1 year DAPT. So this is also not statistical. So there is no increase in bleeding when you use the DAPT for high range 2 to 5 bleeding BAR. Whereas when you go for studying the BAR 3 to 5 bleeding, which is heavy bleeding, 3 to 5 bleeding, it is for Science 90, it is only 2.2% for Science 90 study, but in your DAPT for 12 months, it's 6.3. The p-value is significant. That means the 3 months usage of DFPT and aspirin followed by as a reduced bleeding when compared to the giving DFPT for whole 12 months. This is also for same for Science 28, 1 month versus 12 months, 2.2 versus 4.5%. Stent thrombosis for Science 90 is 4 out of 1,635%, and it's also very low. When it also compared with the Science v USA, the stent thrombosis is about 0.3% in both Science 28 and Science v USA. That means there is no increase in stent thrombosis even if you stop DAPT after 1 month and continue aspirin for another 11 months. So the limitation of these study are Science 90 and Science 28 studies present limitation inherent to non-randomized design. There is no randomization they compare to the previous study. Finding may not be generalized to the patient who do not meet Science short DAPT program inclusion. That is STEMI patients, patient with thrombosis, other exclusion criteria we have given. We can include these patients for this study. The observed treatment effect applies only to patient free from adverse effect. So every patient should have a free from adverse effect for the initial 1 month or initial 3 months for 28 and 90 study respectively. Given that the Science v US was performed approximately 1 decade before, the Science short DAPT program confirmed as related to changes in clinical practice cannot be excluded because it's a very old study we are taking as a control. So that is one of the main limitations. So the conclusion of the study is among high bleeding risk patient undergoing PCA, Science stent, a short DAPT regimen of 1 or 3 months compared to standard DAPT up to 12 months resulted in non-inferior ischemic outcome, similar rate of bleeding for 2 to 5 bleeding bar, but significantly reduced in major bar 3 to 5 bleeding, very low incidence of stent thrombosis. These are the conclusion of this study. Thank you for giving the opportunity. Thank you very much. The study is for discussion, sir.
Thanks, Dr. Suresh. I think you can stop sharing.
Yes.
Actually, what has happened with dual antiplatelet therapy is that the duration of dual antiplatelet therapy seems to be coming shorter and shorter as time goes by. And in fact, there is a trial called ASSET where they did not use aspirin at all. Only for a planned elective PCI, they just gave prasugrel, only prasugrel, and short-term results were good. So I think we are moving away from dual antiplatelet therapy. Probably aspirin is coming out, thinking that aspirin is probably not required. When you use more powerful antiplatelet drugs like ticagrelor or even prasugrel, you're probably not going to require a dual antiplatelet therapy. So I think that is the way future is going to be. And when you look at high ischemic risk patients, maybe those we will change our criteria. My thought process is that over the next 2 to 3 years, instead of looking at high bleeding risk, we'll start looking at high ischemic risk patients. Those are going to continue dual antiplatelet or dual antithrombotic therapy, including the rivaroxaban and all those things that have been coming in. And the rest of everybody is going to take a single antiplatelet. And I think that's the way the future of this holds. And this study, I think, is a very clear indication. Like most of the stents are doing the stent studies in high bleeding risk patients, but I think times are going to change. I think that is how the future is going to be. That's my impression. Others are open for discussion.
Dr. Suresh Kumar, nice presentation. What are the DAPT agent? What are the P2Y12 inhibitor used in the study? The Science 28 and Science 90. Is it clopidogrel or ticagrelor?
Ticagrelor.
Okay. Actually, whether imaging was done in these cases, imaging?
Actually, I don't know, sir, whether imaging was done because
actually
imaging would have been done because they had put the MLA and also in the studies, sir. So imaging would have been done. Without that, they would have not put that.
Yeah, because if you do the imaging, I think you can be a little more confident because the under expansion is one of the important predictor of poor outcome, long-term outcome, namely stent thrombosis and TLR and all. So whereas when you're giving a short-term dual antiplatelet therapy like 6 months or 3 months, 1 month like that, I think imaging becomes very important,
Very
especially for this is mainly for a stable CAD patient, no, not for
Mostly,
acute
mainly for the stable series. Only STEMI, only 7% they have taken. So
Mm-hmm.
STEMI they have omitted, and even if there is thrombus in the STEMI patient also, they have omitted. They have given full DAPT for 12 months.
Yes, but what is the choice of the single, agent antiplatelet therapy?
They
Is it
here
aspirin or clopidogrel or ticagrelor? Still, there is
here
some controversy, no?
here yes here in this study they have done with aspirin, that one antiplatelet, but the same investigator Mehran, they have done the 12 study, sir, where they have put ticagrelor as a single after 3 months.
So there is still some
Yes,
issues
sir.
there, no controversy. Yeah.
Yes, sir. But the recent 2020 ESA guidelines also shows for low bleeding risk and high ischemic risk, we can use this 3 months of DAPT and continue ticagrelor after 3 months. They have given ticagrelor as a single drug indication
Single
for
drug,
HM.
okay. Yeah, that is good idea. Yeah, correct. Instead of aspirin,
Instead of
ticagrelor.
aspirin, they are given ticagrelor as
Monotherapy.
Single
Single
antiplatelet.
antiplatelet therapy.
Yes. Yes.
Good, nice presentation.
Thank you.
Congratulations.
Thanks, Dr. Suresh Kumar. I think lot of interesting thoughts about dual antiplatelet therapy. The last word has not been said because we are still.
I know a lot of still
Hold on.
controversies.
lot of things have to be said. But whatever I have understood about this is that one of the biggest things that have happened is we are looking at several factors over the last several years. Like if you look at all the presentations that went so far, look at presentation from Ravi. He looked at the entire concept and said imaging has changed our thought process about treating ACS. You had the other IVIS presentation from who was that? That showed that under expanded stent you go in and expand again. And so all those things, in fact, the post dilatation, we have become much more aggressive nowadays. That has really limited even without imaging, because after seeing imaging, we have realized that the vessel size is bigger. So our stent sizing is bigger. And post dilatation, we are more aggressive because we find that what you see on the angio may not be the truth. So you go ahead and post dilate it. So I think our technique of angioplasties have improved. I've seen it over the last 15, 20 years. I've definitely seen, I'm sure Dr. Casey must have seen the same thing. That technically we have improved a lot from those days when we are doing angioplasty. They are a little scared. Vessel might rupture, or the stent is of the right size. Though theoretically you say stent size has to be more and the balloon size has to be less and all this nonsense. But still the point is we have learnt a lot. And all those things turned into clinical practice, you really don't seem to be needing dual antiplatelet therapy. Stent is well deployed and it is doing the job very well. And especially the larger vessels with the bigger stents, they don't need much of dual antiplatelet therapy. Another important point is that your plaque is stabilized by a high intensity statin. Most of the studies, nearly 95-97% of these patients are on a high intensity statin, which makes a difference. So several factors, pharmacotherapy has improved, the stent deployment has improved. So many things have improved, which have ultimately changed our perspective. And I think we are still learning. So we'll continue to learn. And as we learn more, I think we'll call this meeting to a close. I think we have drawn on exactly the correct.
Yeah, just one more point. State of the art PCA, if you do, that is, if you deploy the new generation test and use the imaging, intracoronary imaging, either IVIS or OCT, and use a physiology, definitely you can go with a short DAPT, because you get a very optimal result. And then because sometimes, even after stenting, post dilatation, and sometimes, if you put the physiology, that wire, Doppler wire, you can see if you do FFR or IFR or RFR, you can see some lesions there. So you have to correct everything. If you do state of the art PCA like new generation test, imaging plus physiology, I think you can get away with long, especially only in a very high risk patient, we may give for 12 months. Otherwise, as you rightly said, especially in those patients with the larger vessel, even we can get away with the short duration DAPT. Thank you, Dr. Prabhakar, for
thank you so much.
Chance. Thank you very much for the chance. And thank you.
First of all, I should thank Dr. Casey for his very, very insightful discussions and keeping the meeting going. So thank you, Dr. Casey, sir, so much. Avinash, for your
Thank you very much.
for your good words. Dr. Padmanabhan, Dr. Ravichandran Edwin for both sharing a case and sharing. Dr. Arun Pari, Rahul, Suresh Kumar, and Vinod. All your cases were interesting, very good. And we'll also thank Abbott for giving an extra view on science also and the short duration of antiplatelet therapy. So thank you so much. And with that, I think we will call the meeting to a close. Thanks to each one of the participants also who were there. Thank you so much. Good night. Have a
Thank
nice
you. Thank you. Good
Good
night.
night.
Bye bye.
Thank you, sir.
Good
Thank you,
night.
sir.
Thank
Good night.
you.
Thank you.
Have a nice day. Thank you. Bye bye.
Thank you so much.
Thank you.
Thank you very much. Bye bye.